Hey everyone, welcome back to another development log for my indie game, The Affine. It's a 2D procedurally generated tactics RPG where you'll have to explore a procedurally generated world, tame the wild creatures inhabiting it, and use their powers to engage in strategic turn-based grid combat. In this video, I'm pretty keen to fill you in on a bit of the progress that I've made implementing and fleshing out main gameplay features that are going to be a part of the core game loop going forward. What I've been able to achieve are some significant improvements to my procedural generation system, which is responsible for generating and laying out the procedurally generated levels that you'll be exploring. I've been able to add a lot more detail to the items and inventory system in order to allow the player to not only gather but use the loot and materials they'll be harvesting as they explore the world. And finally, I've got a bit of a template going for the crafting system, which is going to be very useful for party management, which will in turn allow me to make more progress on combat going forward. The creatures in the world, which will be the party members for your turn-based combat, are called the Affine because they've got affinities with the natural resources, materials, and energy in the world around them. So the core gameplay loop is going to obviously be centered around turn-based strategic combat. And the problem is, to engage in the combat, you've obviously got to have a party. And that means that I had to put some work into the actual capturing or taming of the wild creatures. To do that, I had to have some means of storing the creatures in the party. So that's where the crafting comes in. Crafting is going to be used to create items called artifacts, which basically store creatures in your party. To be able to craft, I obviously needed mechanics to be able to gather items and materials. And of course, these materials have to be scattered naturally and organically throughout the world. So that led me to do a serious overhaul of the procedural generation system itself. Boiling that down a bit, the core gameplay loop is going to be centered around gathering, crafting, capturing, and battling. In terms of the actual battle mechanics, a lot of these are already in place and there's only, I think, specifics left to finalize. What I'm more interested in is being able to transition in and out of battle as I explore the world. So of course that starts with identifying the tiles using an algorithm that actually make up the battlefield. And of course having a well-defined set of battle end conditions so that the game knows when to actually end combat and transition back into overworld exploration. Capturing creatures to add to your party is something that's going to take place within the actual battle as one of a set of possible turn-based instructions. This has a dependency on needing some kind of data structure storage mechanism to actually store the creatures within your party that just ties into the lore behind the world. To be able to have a crafting system, I first have to decide what a crafting recipe even means. And to do that, I have to be able to have a collection of materials to choose from when creating these recipes. This brings us to gathering. And by gathering, I of course mean gathering items and materials to craft with. And this means that there has to be materials to gather, and these materials obviously have to have some association with the environments they're found in. So this leads us to the questions around biomes and world generation. So in the context of this game, what a biome is a set of pieces of information, variables about how to procedurally generate the world. And each biome might have different aesthetic features such as types of tiles for the floor and types of foliage and environmental features to generate. but it can also be a bit more complicated related to the terrain. So, with all the planning and detail out of the way, we're ready to jump into the game and have a look at some of the improvements that have been made. So right off the bat, we're in a procedurally generated level that is much more interesting and diverse than the ones that were being generated before this update. Originally, there was quite a placeholder style system in place where different biomes were essentially just reskin versions of each other, with different tiles to spawn on the floor and different sprites for some of the environmental props. Now, biomes are distinguished by different terrain features such as elevation and water distribution. And yes, water has been added into the game, and the player will be able to traverse water when they have certain abilities unlocked. Now, one of the major improvements was the ability to climb between different floors. So originally biomes were basically being spawned so that all battlefields were on the same altitude level. Now there's the ability for battlefields to be spawned up on top of a hill, down in a ditch, and the player has the ability to climb between these floors. The sideways climbing is actually still a little bit broken, but that'll be fixed down the line, don't you worry. Anyway, now that I had some more interesting levels being spawned, I was able to start getting creative with some of the materials and the loot that gets spawned around the level that the player can engage in combat to try and get a chance at winning. So over to my right, there's a battlefield with what looks like a piece of quartz to be harvested. Quartz is going to be one of the materials in the game where creatures can be stored to be later used when you're managing your party and trying to figure out your best lineup for combat. Anyway, we'll just enter this combat here. I'm going to place my creature quickly, and one of the things you'll notice is that the human player is actually one of the possible characters within battle, and they have their own set of instructions for gathering and capturing. Anyway, I'm just going to move my player up next to the material and use the interact instruction to harvest that. Now, the quartz has actually been harvested, and of course, don't worry, this will be made to look a little nicer down the line. But I might just end this battle quickly, actually returning my creature to the party and have a look at the material we've gathered. So as you can see, a piece of quartz has been added to the inventory, and we can actually now use that for capturing. Having a look now at the mechanics for capturing wild creatures. So obviously I've got my quartz now, I'm ready to go into battle and try and capture a wild creature. So I'm just going to enter combat now, place my current party member, go over to my player and just start to move a bit closer to the wild creature over here. Now in the real game, the player is not necessarily going to be able to move as far as they want and in any direction, a bit like chess, but for the time being there's a bit of flexibility there, a few cheats for the head developer. Now I'm just going to select my capture instruction, use that on the wild creature, and of course there's not a lot of visual feedback at the moment, but of course if I just end the battle again and open up my party, there's a piece of quartz now with this wild Komodo creature now being stored in the party. So now I'm coming at you from the new desert biome. As you can see, there's a bit of different foliage and features around, and it's a little bit flatter than the grasslands we were previously in. I'm now going to give you a look at the crafting and talk a little bit about how the party is going to work. So across your adventures in this world, you're going to start using the materials which are called Affinite, because they capture the Affine scattered throughout the world. As you can see, I've captured several wild creatures using quartz. The armadillo at the top is a larger in-battle creature, occupies a 2x2 tile area instead of just a 1x1 like these other creatures. But regardless, we've got our quartz and we've captured the creatures using that. Now we're going to talk about artifacts. So Affine Artifacts are going to be the means by which you store multiple creatures in your party at once to start to craft more interesting strategies between multiple creatures for combat. Within my inventory, I've got obviously the quartz from before, as well as some heartwood and bone. These are materials that you'll find for crafting throughout the world, just like we gathered the quartz earlier on. Heading over to the smithing tab, basically we can see that a crafting recipe we've got is for the staff, and the staff is going to be one of the possible Affine artifacts you'll be able to craft. I'm just going to use the heartwood that I've got to craft a heartwood staff right now. And heading back to our artifact window, we can see we've now got a new heartwood staff ready to go in the inventory. I'm going to make it active, move it to the top of our UI, and as you can see, there's 4 empty slots in this artifact. Choosing the top one here, I'm going to insert the armadillo, and I think I'm going to add some other creatures to this staff. And so we've got our 4 creatures now all stored within this staff, meaning that when I enter battle again the next time, I'm going to be able to use all of these 4 creatures at once instead of just one at a time. Okay, so here we are again, ready to go. We've got our party with our creatures all in that Affine Artifact, the heartwood staff, and we're ready to go and enter combat and summon all of these creatures at once. So just going to climb up here to the next level and enter this battle. Just start placing my creatures around the battlefield, and there we go. So obviously everyone highlighted in green is on our team, and I mean, yeah, can just get to work, get them moving. I might just hit OK and let the enemy have a crack for now, but yeah, hopefully that demonstrates the possibility for crafting in structuring your party and the potential to expand on this system even more as I flesh out the types of materials you can find and potentially some unique properties associated with each. So yeah, to sum it up, that's about 2 or 3 months work just in my spare time on this little side project. Obviously, the idea in the beginning was to get that game loop solidified. So be able to enter combat. To be able to enter combat, you've obviously got to be able to capture party members. To do that, I decided you're going to have to craft certain items which are going to be used to store those party members. And to craft those items, you obviously need to gather materials from the world, which you'll gather as you explore further and further into new biomes. So hopefully that demonstrates kind of the thought process behind it all. That was, again, weeks and weeks of work that has really been in planning stages for a while, and that's the reality of game development. You've got to just put your head down, and it's definitely not a breeze the whole way through. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. If you've got any questions about the game, feel free to reach out. And otherwise, stay tuned for the next one. Cheers, guys. Thanks.